Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. North Texas, July 2024. They say everything's bigger in Texas, and that includes the stupidity too. Gavin Weissenberg of Allen, Texas, and Tanner Thomas of Argyle had a plan that they must have cooked up while huffing lead paint. For a year, they had been preparing to carry out an invasion of Haiti. Yes, Haiti. They were going to buy a boat, sail to Gonave Island, which is off the coast of Haiti, and then they would kill every man on the island and take the women and children as their sex slaves. Did I mention that Gonave Island has a population of 87,000 people? This would be a stupid plan even if they went to Micronesia and tried it, but to call themselves invading Haiti is suicide. Anyway, our two Call of Duty commandos began their brilliant scheme in July of last year when they started plotting with each other over the internet what they were going to do. And then in August of last year, Weissenberg enrolled in North Texas Fire Academy in Rockwall in an effort to gain training for useful skills for their plot. He failed out of the program after only 6 months. In January of this year, Tanner Thomas enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. Apparently, he thought that would give him enough training to overthrow an entire island of tens of thousands of people. You know, unless the plan involves dropping a nuke on the place, the only thing the Air Force could prepare them to do is to become POWs. Right after Weissenberg flunked out of the Fire Training Academy, he immediately bought tickets to Thailand. I'm pretty sure he used his state mental health disability money to pay for it. He went to Thailand with the intention of enrolling in a sailing course. I guess he was going to be the skipper for whatever dinghy raft they bought for the invasion. According to the indictment, though, Weissenberg ultimately didn't enroll due to the costs. By the way, these two degenerates were actively plotting to go to Haiti to violate children. And this Weissenberg creep went to Thailand to take a sailing course? Sure, pull my other leg, why don't you? Thailand is a magnet for pedophiles. If he wanted to learn to sail a boat, there's plenty of places in Texas where he could have learned that. And if he didn't like Texas, he could have bought a plane ticket to some other U.S. state. Why go to a foreign country in Asia thousands of miles away for something he could have done at home for a lot cheaper? I think it's safe to say these guys were already practicing their demonic activities with the kids over there in Thailand. While Weissenberg was busy prowling the playgrounds, Thomas got the Air Force to give him a duty assignment in Maryland. He did this to recruit homeless people from the Washington, D.C. area, as well as attempt to recruit people online. Well, at least they were thinking that they might need more than 2 goofballs to take over an island. It's not entirely spelled out how these two planned to get the weapons they would need for their invasion, but given these two's IQ, I'm willing to bet they thought they could just take them off the locals. Now, the two of them have been arrested, and they've also been accused of coercing a minor to engage in sex acts on camera back in 2024. I hope that somebody also asks some questions about Weissenberg's whereabouts in Thailand while he was busy looking for a sailing course. A grand jury indicted them both on counts of conspiracy to commit murder, maim, or kidnap in a foreign country, and production of child pornography. They face up to life in federal prison if they're convicted on the conspiracy to murder charge, and 15 to 30 years if convicted on the child pornography charge. You've heard of the Bay of Pigs? Well, these two little stunts should have been called the Puddle of Crap. I've got to wonder, though, how much meth do you have to smoke before you start to think this is a good idea? These two white men were talking about going to Haiti, and they were going to kill all the men on the island, and they were going to take the women and the children as sex slaves. The U.S. government didn't arrest these two for the sake of the Haitians. They did it to protect these two. The worst thing the U.S. government could do would be to drop these two gerbils off over in Haiti. I would imagine that the only Haitians they've ever actually met would be Corinne Pierre and Roland Martin, and because of that I can understand why they might think that the Haitians are soft. But if they ever made the mistake of actually going to Haiti, then they'd find out there's a reason the French never came back. Even the U.S. doesn't want to go in there since it would be like Mogadishu, but without the RPGs. Well, I for one say let them go. They'll have a chance to meet some of the friendly locals, like Barbecue, the corrupt cop turned homicidal maniac, whose specialty is roasting people alive, hence the name. Barbecue and the rest of those lunatics would turn them into hors d'oeuvres. Forget about body parts, there wouldn't even be body pieces left. And if the Haitians let them live, that would be even worse, because they would turn those two white boys into their sex slaves. Ordinarily, I would say that these two have read the Turner Diaries too many times, but they would have to learn to read first. This is what happens when your formative years are spent in video game chat rooms where you talk racist trash while playing World of Warcraft. A lot of things sound good to idiots while they're smoking cheap weed and have been going on marathon video game sessions while binge watching their favorite TV shows starring white guys acting tough. You start to brainwash yourself and think you can do that mess for real, but you can't. But this little incident does answer the question, do these morons who like to talk trash in comment sections and such actually think that they're tough enough to call themselves killing a whole bunch of black folks on their own? Yeah, they've actually convinced themselves that they can. See, this is the end result of all of those decades of action movies that people like these two love to worship. Everything from Rambo to John Wick. They win a couple of rounds on Call of Duty and they start telling themselves that they're some sort of elite soldier, when in reality they're just a couple of pencil-neck pedophiles from Texas. Alright, now here's where the conversation gets a little serious. Where did these two inbreds get the idea that just a little bit of US military training is all that would be required for them to take over an island in Haiti? Well, perhaps they got the idea from websites like this, militarytimes.com. Last year, around the time these two had first started planning their invasion, militarytimes.com posted a story entitled, "This Marine Ruled as a King of a Haitian Island for 3 years." It was about a guy named Faustin Workus, and this Military Times website gushes over him as, quote, the stuff of Marine Corps legend. Long story short, this article says that in 1915, Workus was posted to Haiti to, as they put it, restore order. Now, the way the Military Times tells it, this white man from Pennsylvania just fell in love with Haiti, and he just couldn't stop from going back. And, in the tradition of the white man's burden, he wasn't doing it just to benefit himself, no. He instead spent his time stopping the local tax collectors from mistreating Haitian women. Remember, white supremacy always tries to justify its violence and invasions with the pseudo-chivalrous pap about, oh, we're doing it to save the local women from being mistreated by the men there. That's one of their favorite propaganda talking points to use. It's supposed to be their way of saying, well, we may be bad, but those people we're trying to take over, they're even worse. According to this story, the woman Workus rescued from the tax collectors claimed to be Queen Taimini of, wait for it, she claimed to be a queen from La Gonave. Any of this sounding familiar yet? This so-called article doesn't say what happened during this guy's time, but it does say that 5 years later, Workus was still obsessing over Haiti and badgered his superiors to send him back there. Kind of the same way that Tanner character was badgering his superiors to send him to Baltimore. They understand that when you're white, the military lets you choose where you go. Now, of course, this article tries to make this Workus character out to be so beneficial and benevolent to the locals, so much so that they just had to make him their king. The talking point used is that there was a superstition that a previous ruler who disappeared in 1848 said that there would be a descendant with the same name who would come back to the throne. And this was how this white guy from Pennsylvania became the White King of La Gonave. Well, the king only ruled for 3 years, and then he went back to the States and never returned. A strange thing for a king to do, don't you think? This guy spent years trying to get to Haiti. He nagged his superiors to send him there time and time again, and then when they do it, he becomes a king. And then leaves after only a few years. And the story never says that Workus married Queen What's-Her-Name. This woman was his queen, but apparently they weren't married either. How accepted was this guy? This so-called article says the guy oversaw the construction of the first airfield and directed the first census. Now, that airfield was for the U.S. military aircraft. He certainly wasn't doing it to have an airfield for the locals. And a census, that's just a head count, which is a crucial part of how the military does their assessments. You always want to know how many of the local people you may have to kill. Now, as we all know, the Europeans in their diaspora were obsessed with trying to become kings, even if only in name, and the ones who actually did travel, they were always telling tall tales about all the great stuff they claimed to have done. They were constantly telling lies and fairy tales about how wherever they went, the locals bowed down to them and just couldn't wait to make them their leader. Which is why they had to wage wars of imperialism and kill and enslave everyone they met, because the locals just wanted them to be their rulers so badly. Now, while the Military Times was trying to lionize this guy, at no point does this article ever mention that the U.S. had been stealing Haiti's wealth. In fact, just a year before this Workus character first got to Haiti, the U.S. had robbed the Haitian National Bank of its gold reserves and had set up a full occupation. They were not there to restore order. They were there to set up Haiti as an outpost of white power in the Caribbean. And that wasn't even the first time the U.S. had invaded, because before that, the U.S. had passed what it called the U.S. Guana Islands Act of 1856, which authorized white businessmen to lay claim to any islands that had guana deposits. They chose to invade and take over Navassa Island. These white American businessmen who invaded these places worked the locals under harsh conditions so bad that in 1899 there was a labor riot. By the time the Haitians' labor revolt had ended, 5 whites would be dead. The U.S. arrested a number of Haitians, 43 in all, and charged them with crimes ranging from rioting to murder. And that was when 2 African-American Reed Foundational Black American organizations hired lawyers to defend these Haitians. See, that's the part of all of these struggles and revolutions that gets left out. The part the foundational Black Americans have always played in these things. Unsung heroes because we weren't looking for glory. When we saw the Haitians on code and putting in work, we didn't condemn them. We didn't say, oh, you're going to make things bad for the rest of us. We didn't try to get in good with white power by saying, we're going to help you go after them, master. Instead, what we said was these men should be free. They've committed no crime. And then we put resources behind that effort. The same way the black grassroots rallied in 2020 during those uprisings and made sure to get people the legal help that they needed, get people bailed out. We got a long tradition of doing this, a strong tradition. Now, the white government's original plan was that they were going to make a mass example out of the Haitians, give them a fair trial to be immediately followed by a fair hanging. But as a result of the support they got from the FBA community, 3 of the defendants were convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. Supporters of the defendants mounted a petition campaign urging President Benjamin Harrison to grant clemency. As a result, he commuted the death sentences to life imprisonment. After that, the U.S. abandoned its direct exploitation of Navassa Island, and from then on only made rhetorical claims to it. That's what was going on before the white Marines showed up, raping the land of its resources and stealing the nation's wealth. This was the order that the U.S. sent this workus guy there to restore. But of course, there was no mention of any of this in the Military Times because they care about history so much, right? I've been telling you for nearly 2 decades now that when you see these white guys who are so obsessed with going to these third world countries and who can't wait to get there, it's not because they like the locals so much. They go there primarily to engage in sexual exploitation, usually of children. The UN had that scandal years back where a number of so-called peacekeepers were down there raping those kids. And what did frickin' Frack the Brainless Brothers want to do? The exact same thing. The pedophile charge against them is no coincidence. So while this story does fall into the man bites dog category to an extent, it's also another example that the U.S. military has a tradition of white men going into places and trying to chase after every unprotected female they can find. Just like Workus the pervert, these 2 were trying to prey on the people there. It's been over 100 years since the last white man thought he would be the king of Gonave, and as I've always told you, white supremacy doesn't have any new material, so they just do the same thing, only more of it. And these 2 gerbils are not boomers. They're not even Gen Xers. They're both Gen Z. Ages 20 and 21. This is what white society's been teaching in its homes. This is why racism is still a problem. The people who benefit from white supremacy lie and claim that they're not doing any of it, when in reality, they're the main purveyors of it. And it's being taught from generation to generation, but that's one of the things that you're not allowed to say under white supremacy. Every major arena of the society plays along with their lies and denials. But we won't. You know, if I really wanted to be mean, what I'd do is I'd start a petition to tell the Justice Department to drop the charges against these 2 if they agreed to go to Haiti, and give them all the weapons you want. Give them guns, give them knives, give them grenades, hell, give them a couple of howitzers. Instead of dying in the first 5 seconds, they die in the first 5 minutes. Televise that stuff, go ahead and post it on social media, let all of their buddies see exactly what would happen if any of these clowns actually thought that they were going to play out their Call of Duty fantasies in the real world. Websites like the Military Times have clowns like this thinking to themselves that history would repeat itself. Well, in a way, they actually would be right, but the history that would repeat itself wouldn't be Workus the wannabe white king. Instead, since these 2 are from Texas, the history that would repeat itself would be the Alamo. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Bo McLean, Starlet Thompson, Otis Pimpleton, Jacques Hargett, and Nora Brown. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.